Okay, well, welcome everybody to our September 14th Akka.net community stand-up. We do not have a show and tell speaker today, so I will be doing that myself along with Gregorius. We've got a bunch of other updates that we want to cover. And our show and tell presentation today will primarily consist of two parts. First, Gregorius is going to demonstrate some of the work he's been doing on Akka management. So we have a couple of live demos, one that's running on top of Azure App Service, another that's running on top of Azure Container Apps. So we'll get into that briefly. And then I'm going to close out today's community stand-up by talking a bit about Lightbend's license change for Akka, what that means for Akka.net, if anything. And we'll probably touch on maybe the Akka.net 1.5 roadmap to some extent. So Gregorius, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you very much. How are you?
Doing good, dealing with a lot of hectic stuff. As you know, I was just telling Gregorius that our garage door broke last night, and my wife's car is trapped inside. So we're working on getting that fixed. And then I just spent most of this morning writing a very detailed specification for part of Akka.net 1.5, which is the new CQRS support. Namely, we want to add the ability to make tags much more efficient at scale. Now, this isn't a feature that we've documented all that well. It's been available in Akka.net for years and years, though. Tags are essentially a way of performing a secondary index on events that are persisted by entity actors, and you can use these tags to create sort of cross-entity projections. There's a lot of powerful capabilities that all stem from that. One of our goals with Akka.net 1.5 is to enable CQRS and to kind of promote some of those patterns for building event-driven applications down the road. But there's some major limitations with the ways tags are implemented in SQL in particular right now. The biggest one being is that tags exist as an unindexed column on every single event that's persisted. It's basically like a comma delimited array of strings. And that means that every time we use tag queries today in Akka.net 1.4, that's going to necessitate a table scan. We have some customers that have on the order of billions of events in that event table. So a tag query would be extremely non-performant in that environment. So we're working on a number of designs to basically essentially move tags into their own table that can have its own indices, which should make those queries quite fast in the future. But we've had to reason about all sorts of interesting problems like backwards compatibility, making things making it so deletes clean up everything. You don't want to have a tagged version of an event sitting there, but the original event is gone, all that sort of stuff. So that's what I've been working on lately. Let's touch on a couple of important, let me grab my little banner here. Let's go ahead and talk about some recent Akka.net releases. We actually have gotten quite a bit done since our most recent August community stand-up. And so I'll touch on a couple of the main Akka.net project releases here. First, we shipped our first alpha of Akka.net 1.5. Now, this has a couple of pretty significant changes in it. I would argue that the biggest ones are that we have added dual targeting support for .NET 6. So in addition to targeting .NET Standard 2.0, which we're going to continue to do, .NET Standard is what Akka.net, .NET Standard 2 is what Akka.net 1.4 also targets. We also have a dedicated .NET 6 target. So if you're building a .NET 6 or a .NET 7 application, the .NET 6 version of Akka.net is what your application is going to start referencing. And you'll see some immediate performance improvements, particularly around the dispatcher when you do that. That's because we took advantage of a native interface that was introduced in .NET Core 3.0 called the iThreadPool work item. And this makes it much easier for us to eliminate context switching using the default .NET thread pool. So we have some links on that pull request there that'll show how big the performance figures are. But for really low throughput actors, the performance improvement can be like 4x on there. So it's a pretty significant improvement. We did that. We made a number of other changes all around Akka.Cluster. One important change that Gregorius implemented is we've added some new message types that make it much easier to troubleshoot heartbeat problems. And these will be turned on by default in Akka.net 1.5. This message format's been available in Akka.net since a fairly early version of 1.4. But one of the ways we introduce these wire format changes is we try to kind of seed them early on. And then gradually, as they get sort of baked into users' upgrade cycles, once all those sort of read side pieces of code are out there in the wild, it's safe for us to start producing these new wire type events. Even still, we do have a compatibility flag that you can turn off if you're upgrading from, let's say, a much older version of Akka.net to a newer version. So that is available there. And then the other really big change that's in Akka.net 1.5 so far is Akka.Cluster sharding has been completely restructured. It is much faster and it is much more robust at handling large numbers of shards and a large number of remember entities. What this change fundamentally did was it broke apart the state that we use for keeping track of where shards are allocated inside the network. Rather than having the coordinator keep track of everything, we now have shard specific data stores. This makes it easier for us to recover remembered entities in parallel in multiple places inside the cluster now. So it'll speed up the overall recovery of shards when we're doing a rebalancing, is one big impact of that. And on top of that, it makes it so the coordinator state is much simpler. So the release notes here kind of document what those new options are, how to opt into them, what some of the implications for doing this are. Long story short, the recommended configuration going forward for Akka.net is going to be using state store mode. This is basically where the coordinator state goes. You should use DData. And then for the Remember Entities store, which is the new data store that now exists in Akka.net 1.5, you want to use the event sourced store. This will give you the best of both worlds. It does require Akka.persistence for recovering that Remember Entities data, but it's extremely fast and it's much more supports much more, let's say, sort of parallelism than the previous Akka.persistence data store did. So that's what we recommend going forward. We have pretty detailed release notes on here that kind of walk through it. And I think that's most of the gist of this update here. There's a bunch of other fixes that are all very detailed in here. Gregorius spent a lot of time putting these release notes together. We also did a release to the stable version of Akka.net 1.4. So this is 1.4.41. These included some logging changes, in particular around trying to make DData log fewer messages when debug mode is enabled. We're going to release another patch that adds another round of, let's say, pruning changes to DData in order to try to make their logs a little bit less verbose. But the really big impact thing we did in 1.41 was we used the newest version of the Google Protobuf compiler to generate brand new versions of all these old protobuf messages. We haven't done that in several years. There's been lots of performance improvements made to the way protobuf works internally. And we have decided to go ahead and regenerate those. And this resulted in actually a fairly significant performance improvement on the read side and write side of Akka.net. So you can see here that we are allocating slightly more bytes per message, but we've shaved off in the neighborhood of about, let's say, 40 nanoseconds on writes. But the really big improvement came on reads, where we went from taking about 2000 nanoseconds per read, that's about 2 microseconds, to doing 1.73. So that's more than, that's like a 20, let's see, 50, that's like a 10 to 15% improvement in there. And that's just from, essentially updating these protobuf definitions is all that we did there. So that's what we got done on the core Akka.net project. Of course, we have more work planned on Akka.net itself. But then we also had some pretty major releases around Akka management. I'll get to that in a moment since Gregorius has a big demo for it. Last thing I want to touch on real briefly is some updates to Akka hosting that we made. These are a little bit more minor. The biggest one that we added is Gregorius introduced a new method. I guess I can get rid of the do not merge label since that's been merged
Yeah.
in. One of the things that Gregorius added was some APIs for being able to programmatically configure split brain resolvers. This is one of the things people were still having to do in Hocon, even with the earlier versions of Akka hosting. Gregorius came up with a good API for this that is now available as of 0.4.3. I think we still have to add some documentation for this into the Akka hosting repository, but these APIs are all pretty discoverable via IntelliSense. So you'll see if you go to if I take a look at the source code here. If I go to our tests, let's see, split brain resolver spec, and we go to, let's say, configure.
It
Where
should
did
be on the bottom.
Oh, the spec builder, right? I see.
Yeah.
Here you go. With clustering, SBR options, split brain resolver option dot default, which I guess uses the keep majority split brain resolver.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep, that's the
So
default.
and so you have a little options class you can use to tailor how your SBR is going to work. So that's all available in Akka hosting 0.4.3. And then I guess the next thing we have to talk a bit about, one last thing before we get to Akka management is Akka.Persistence.Azure. We made some releases to this as well. The really big change that we made here was adding support for using the default Azure credential inside the Akka hosting APIs. So this means that if you want to use Akka hosting with Akka.Persistence.Azure, you want to use the default Azure credential, which allows you to passively pick up your Azure credentials from the environment you're running inside of. So this is all using the pod identity that's assigned to your AKS pod, or the Azure Active Directory identity or the service principal that's assigned to your app service. This will allow you to use the connection strings that are available to that rather than having to using the credentials that are available to that service principal rather than you having to manually specify all of it. So that's what we've added here. That's been a feature that's been requested by users. That's relatively easy for us to do. But without any further ado, Gregorius, you've done a tremendous amount of work around Akka management and also being able to get service discovery working in a generic way inside Akka.net, inside Windows Azure. So let me go ahead and switch our banners real quick to show and tell. And I'm going to have you share your screen and walk through our Azure App Service demo and our Azure Container App demo.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Well, as a recap, Akka that discovery that Azure is generic discovery solution for the Azure platform. It is a discovery module that, if you use alongside with Cluster Bootstrap, allows you to do cluster formation inside a dynamic cluster environment. Now, what the benefit of this is that you don't need any static seed nodes declaration or lighthouse anymore, and then it's became a lot more resilient when the cluster reboots or you're actually doing a rollout update to it. Now, the differences of this module compared to the other modules is that uh, instead of very platform specific, like in AWS, we have a different plugins for EC2 and ECS, and Kubernetes works differently. This one is actually a generic way of doing discovery inside Azure. It is not based on any of the platform specific management API, so it's not actually using ARM to do discovery. It actually managed its own list of cluster members using the Azure table storage. It actually, each of the actor system register itself into the registry table as quote unquote inside the storage table storage, and then remove itself when it shuts down. And in the case of a non-clean shutdown, it actually does its own cleanup every few seconds just to make sure that there's no buildup of junk data inside that table.
Yes.
Um,
So just to kind of recap on what Gregorius has been saying here, so like this Akka discovery component is used to like dynamically help discover seed nodes and form clusters, and the other previous implementations that he's developed leverage things like the Kubernetes control plane API or resource tags on Amazon Web Services. Whereas this just uses entries in an Azure table and with some custom logic that he's built to kind of help detect which nodes are alive and which ones are dead. And it will work really for any Azure platform. So any Azure app that you want to run on that cloud platform can use this discovery plugin to help dynamically form clusters.
Mhm. Exactly. And this is the demo app that we borrowed from Orleans. Orleans uses the same demonstration application for their technology demo. This one is actually running in app service. It's actually running on 3 nodes. You can do a scale, upscale and downscale real easily from the portal. Like, say if I want to upscale it to 5, then I could just set it from the dashboard and hit save, and it will actually update it. But I don't know if this is because of my personal inexperience in Azure or not, but I found that app service does upscaling and downscaling really slowly. Like, if you like here, it says that we've actually updated it. It should have been upscaled to 5 nodes, but it would actually take several minutes for it to actually spin up instances and actually run that. So um, for that, we'll just leave this running for now, and we'll get back to it and see if it actually, managed to upscale the instances to 5 or not. Some of the gotchas with app services is that, unlike Docker or Kubernetes, there's no way for you to actually specify uh, ports on the virtual private cloud. You have to actually uh, ask for it. Like here on the bicep file, you have to actually say that I want two ports, and please assign that on runtime. So that's one of the minor thing that you have to watch out for inside app services. And the other one is, since there's going to be 2 IPs running inside the node, uh, one of them is the website IP that is being used by the load balancer, and the other one is actually the private uh, IP that we want to run inside the VPC using a virtual network. Uh, you have to actually grab those from within the environment variable. Like, you have to actually grab it from inside these two um, environment variables. One is the website private IP, and the other one is website private ports. And then do a little, string magic to it. But yeah, that's the gotchas you have to deal with if you want to actually deploy a dynamic cluster inside app services.
Now, how does this compare to container apps?
Well, container apps is, I think, backed by Kubernetes, and container apps is really snappy. Like, you upscale it, and all of the instance just loads, which is really, really, really good. But for the app container, here we actually have one running with 5 nodes. Um, you run into a problem where the edge proxy doesn't really support sticky sessions. So if you have more than one node running, or one instance running inside your
You're talking
inside
about
your web
Signal
app.
R, right?
Yeah, it's the WebSocket.
Yeah.
It couldn't handle WebSocket really well, like which actually they actually address it inside one of their, well, um, let's say it this way. Container app is still in beta, it's not really well. It's generally available, but it's still a non-finished product. So they might actually improve upon this later on, but from their own uh, support personnel, they say that if you want to use Blazor, SignalR, and WebSocket with multiple instances, you have to set your minimum replica and your maximum replica to one. So you can't really use
Which means you
clustering.
really can't use multiple instances with it.
Yeah, though there was a guy I talked to, like in a stream, like he said, you could use a Dapper and another load balancer to actually do that job, but I'm not Azure savvy enough to actually implement that in this demo.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work.
Kind of, kind of. Anyway, for this demo, let's say that we want to actually upscale it and create a new revision.
So this is like a new
And
Kubernetes deployment, basically, right?
let's
Cool.
let's try downscaling it to 3, and then create. This will actually provision a new revision. It's still doing it, deploying, and it should appear right here on the list. There we
All
go.
right, there you go.
And we divert all the traffic to the new revision. Well, if you go here, you'll see that we'll actually have 8 nodes now because we have 2 revision, one with 5 nodes and one with 3 nodes.
Ah, interesting.
So you have to actually turn off the old one first. Save that. This will actually remove this revision. And when that is complete, in a few seconds, knock on wood. There we go. Now, if we refresh, that's weird.
You have to delete the revision.
I did. That's weird. It doesn't update my stuff. Let's try it again. Save. It's updating revisions.
I wonder if the issue is that those pods are still technically active, but they're just not receiving any traffic from the reverse proxy anymore.
I don't know. It might be that I forgot to do some offerings to the demo god earlier. So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you being a good sport and doing a live demo in front of well, not just in front of a bunch of people, but also in perpetuity here on our recorded YouTube options here. Let's go check on it one
Yep.
more time, and then we'll maybe move on to the next segment.
And there we go.
Oh, hey, there you go. You're down to 5 again. Great.
hmm
Well, the whole goal behind, and I'll go ahead and bring both of us back on screen here again. The whole goal behind doing this is to try to make it easier to run Akka.net and lighter weight platform as a service options. So, in addition to Azure App Service and Azure Container Apps, I know you've also validated that our Amazon Elastic Container Service discovery works as well. So, if you want to
hmm
run in their sort of lightweight containerized environment, Akka.net fully supports it. Um,
hmm
so,
And yeah, on the second note, all of this came with Akka hosting baked in, so it's really easy to actually develop using these new stuff.
Well, good. Well, we'll link to these tutorial apps from the official Akka.net website in short order here. But for the time being, I've shown the links to them down inside the actual chat for our little YouTube stream today. So thanks for your demo, Gregorius,
Hmm.
and I'll go ahead and move on to our next piece here, which is going to be, let's see, talking a bit about. I guess I do have one more thing for you, actually, in terms of future Akka.net plans, which is the Akka.hosting
Yes.
test kit. So let me go ahead and give you control again.
Yeah. Well, this is just a proof of concept as of right now, but I've been working on a test kit for Akka.hosting. Um, all of the changes and how to use are actually listed here inside the PR itself. Right now, it's still in draft. It's still waiting for a release from Akka.net to actually make this work. But I've actually tested it locally, and it works just fine.
Oh, that's great. Well,
Mhm.
the whole goal behind this Akka hosting.test kit is to be able to use the Akka hosting APIs to configure the test actor system, but still be able to use the test actor, the await assert, expect message, all those other normal API calls that you're used to. We want to
Mhm.
have the ability to go ahead and expose those. So this is something that we kind of decided that was useful for us in the course of our own development work. Particularly, I've been doing some work, some consulting work here at Petabridge for a couple Akka.net customers, and I having something like this would have made my job a lot easier because we've been using Akka hosting for all these applications going forward. And being able to go ahead and say, okay, I want this customer's custom serialization, and I want this background service the Akka depends on all running would make it much easier for me to author integration tests. So we'll go ahead and do a new release of Akka.net fairly soon to get those test kit changes out. I think that should be pretty doable. Um,
That would be great.
yep. Now let's focus on sort of the last thing in our show and tell today, which is going to be talking about Lightbend's licensing changes. So I'm going to drop a link to our blog post in chat here as well, so I can highlight this on screen. So what happened last week was in fact, I'll go ahead and go side screen here. There we go. We'll do that. So what happened last week was I was just going about my business, doing doing my everyday Akka.net maintenance stuff, and one of our core developers of Akka.net sent me a link to this blog post from Lightbend entitled "Why We Are Changing the License for Akka." And I'll go ahead and open that up real briefly. This is written by Jonas, the original creator of Scala Akka, and now currently the CEO of Lightbend, the company that owns the license for Akka and does all the core development around it. Now, if I scroll down to here, let's see. They are switching to same license that MariaDB uses, the business source license. Here's where the rubber really meets the road. The business source license is a source available license that allows using the code for development and other non production work. However, if you want to use the BSL in production, you have to purchase a commercial license from Lightbend. That commercial license will be available at no charge for companies that make less than $25 million a year in annual revenue. And I think the other thing they mentioned on here is that the BSL reverts to an Apache 2.0 license after 3 years, meaning that any code changes they commit under the business source license to the Akka source code will go back to being Apache 2.0 after 3 years. So this is the gist of what Akka and what's happening to the original Scala Akka project and Lightbend's sort of business case for doing that. They basically, what it comes down to it is they are making this change because Akka is a not Akka. Lightbend is a relatively small company, about 100 to 150 people, supporting large banks, companies like Starbucks, who probably don't pay very much in the form of their Lightbend subscriptions to maintain this infrastructure that's completely critical for their business. So Lightbend has changed the license in order to extract more revenue per customer. I did a quick live stream over the weekend speculating on some of the reasons why they might have done this and what I think the impact will be. But the brass tacks thing I want to address first before I touch on any of that is what's the impact of this on Akka.net? Well, as I mentioned in our blog post, Akka.net's not impacted by this. And here's why. First, anything that was previously contributed under Apache 2.0 still is Apache 2.0. You can't retroactively change the open source software license. Otherwise, the whole model of open source wouldn't work. So anything that's been previously committed under Apache 2.0 still is Apache 2.0. So if in terms of Akka.net's porting features from Akka, we just have to make sure that any of those changes that we port must be done prior to this commit. This was the final commit that represents the 2.6.20 release of Akka. That's the final release under Apache 2.0. We can port any code changes made prior to that without any issues. Now, going forward with the new changes that Lightbend introduces to the Akka code base for Akka 2.7 and later, we will not be porting those changes to Akka.net because of that rate. It's not really clear what the contribution attribution rules look like anymore. So we're not going to be getting into the business of trying to figure that out. We're simply going to avoid it altogether. I don't think that is a huge issue for us. And the reason being is that Akka.net is a project that has stood on its own 2 feet for many years now. We ourselves have quite a lot of distributed systems experience, so do our users. And I think that we have a pretty clear idea on how to deliver great experiences to .NET developers who are trying to build some of the world's most important software. We're perfectly content to pursue our own original designs and to continue to support them the way we have going back all the way to 2015 when Petabridge was first created, which is making commitments around providing detailed upgrade paths for users, making commitments around backwards compatibility, good versioning practices, robust security practices as well. These are all things that we're still committed to doing going forward. Lightbend's business practices don't really have any impact on that. Now, lastly, just in terms of kind of speculating on what's going to happen to the future of Scala Akka and Lightbend, it's tough for me to say. It'll probably take a couple of years for this to shake out, but we've already seen some other pretty large open source projects that depend on Akka, such as Apache Flink, for instance, have decided that they are going to need to find a solution that allows them to move away from using Akka.Cluster, which is what Apache Flink uses internally. I think that this will have a bit of a chilling effect for the Scala ecosystem in general, and for the Scala version of the Akka project. As far as Akka.net's concerned, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're a .NET Foundation project. We do Apache 2.0. That is going to be how we continue to operate. I don't see any reason why I'd want to do anything different. We build fantastic tools for .NET developers, and we are committed to sticking with that. And that's what I see us doing in the foreseeable future. So, in case you were concerned about this license change and what its impact is, I hope between our blog post, my video I did this weekend, and our community stand up just now, I hope your concerns have been addressed. But always, if you do have any additional questions or comments, you should feel free to reach out to us in Discord. We do have an ongoing thread about this license change there as well, and hopefully we'll have a chance to address any issues you and your business might have. Now, with that being said, what we have to look forward to coming up between now and the next stand-up, we are definitely going to do another release of Akka.net 1.4. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this real quick. We're definitely going to do another release of Akka.net 1.4. More than likely, we'll probably also do another release of Akka.net 1.5. We're in the process of planning some major changes around the Akka.persistence bits in order to support these new sort of CQRS models going forward. And Akka management and Akka.hosting are probably coming out of beta and are going to be fully blown sort of APIs frozen sort of packages going forward. Looks like we are on track to do that. between now and I think it's November 10th, not November 10th, October 10th, I believe, is our next meeting. Let me double check that. Let's see. Our next meeting is October 12th. Okay, I was off. That was a n plus one, n minus one error on my part. Um, so we'll probably have all those packages out of beta then. I'm also hoping that we can announce a new product that we're working on then. I kind of teased it a little bit in Discord this week. Unfortunately, my UI preview, I haven't gotten quite as far as I would like on that yet. Programmers tend to take things pretty literally. So I would like to go ahead and have a much cleaner and nicer looking UI before I show it to everybody and be able to show you my vision for how we can continue to make observability and management of Akka.net applications even easier. Phobos is a great step in that direction. And what we're going to do next, I think you guys will like even more than that. So thank you very much for your time and attention today. We really appreciate it. And let's see, go back to here real quick. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. This helps us reach out to the community and give important updates and tutorials and YouTube videos and so forth. So please go ahead and show us your support that way. Also, we are looking for some more show and tell speakers for October, November, and December. We've got some prospective ones lined up, but we could always use more in the pipeline. So please go ahead and take a look at the links that we've included in our emails recently and also in the Akka.net discussions area. We have a pinned post up there for trying to find some more show and tell speakers. And if you have any questions about doing that, you can go ahead and reach out to me in Discord. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time and attention today. We appreciate it. Gregorius, do you have anything to add before we close out?
No, you covered everything.
All right, good. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week, and we will catch you next month. Until then, sayonara.